Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Intellectual Potluck. Today, we're going to be exploring a question that has been on my mind quite a bit, and it's do we ever grow up from high school? So, to help me answer it, I've brought in a bit of an expert, my sister Mel.
Hi.
So, Mel not only went through high school, but she has also been a teacher for many years. Not calling you old, but
11 years, if you want to be precise.
we didn't celebrate your 10-year.
No, we did not celebrate my 10-year. I think it just very much depresses me that my first GCSE kids are now in their mid-20s.
Yes, I saw you posted a thing the other day, and it was about like cells, like plant cells, and
Yeah.
you were saying that those kids are now in their 20s.
Yeah, so those kids were 13 at that time, so they would be 22 now.
We're really old.
Yeah, we're old.
I called Grant middle aged earlier, and then I was like, soon that's not going to be a joke.
Oh, I couldn't any
He's
age be
turning
middle-aged though.
36. So, yeah, I know. He says he had his midlife crisis before I even met him. So he would have been like 25.
Oh, Grant's gonna be 36. That's still mid-30s though.
I know. He called it late 30s, but
It's
I'm like,
not
nah,
late
it's
30s.
mid 37 is late.
I'm turning 33 this year, and I think that that's still early 30s just. Your mid is
Yeah.
4, 5, 6.
But I maintain that 30s have been, like, the best. I think in my 20s, I was still figuring out myself and, like, my brain, and it sounds like such a cliche, but I really actually think it's true, and then I suppose my late 20s, and then when I hit 30s, I was kinda like, "Okay, I've made it this far, so must be doing alright with something," and
Yeah, I
weirdly, that
think
gave me
you
confidence.
Yeah, I think you definitely feel more like yourself when you're in your 30s. Like, you know who you are. You're not just trying to please other people. Tend to be more settled in like your career and everything like that.
Yeah, hopefully have a bit more money. I mean, I'm waiting for that bit to come true still,
So,
but I've heard it happens in your 30s. So, fingers crossed it will eventually come true. Also, so this is my first time doing a remote recording. So, Mel is over in England and I'm in Brisbane in Australia, so we are remote recording. So, if the video and everything comes out completely shit, then I might not end up using the video. I don't know. It's all a trial. We'll figure it
that's
all out.
fine by me.
But it'll be great, I'm sure. It'll big believer in things just work themselves out. Technology is smarter than me, so I'm sure it knows what it's doing. But yeah, very glad to do this trial of remote recording because they make it look so easy. Like some of the YouTubers make it look so easy, and they've just got like four cams and they're all like talking to each other. And I'm like, I don't know if I've made it really complicated, but it was hard.
I don't know because I've done a lot of virtual meetings, virtual talks, lessons, things like that.
Yeah.
But this is different because it's recording at the same time.
Yeah, but like, oh, you can record from like Zoom and stuff,
You
can't
can,
you?
yeah, you can record from Teams. I've done it before.
Maybe I should have tried that. That feels so much easier next time. But yeah, we're here. We made it. And yeah, we're gonna chat about high school because I don't know. Like I feel like the impact of high school really like stays with you. I think especially in your 20s, the things that happen in high school, they just seem to linger. I also think that a lot of people struggle to shake like the high school mentality. Sometimes like clickiness and bitchiness,
Mhm.
it's all very high school sometimes and it kept going through my mind. So I assume it does for other people too.
Yeah, I mean, so I've always worked in education since I left education myself, and seeing like the same patterns with the young people now, but also within the workplace, not so much where I work now at all, but just some people just never leave the classroom in that mentality.
Yeah, which is worrying because the classroom mentality, from what I remember, was super toxic.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't for everyone though. So, I mean, I guess if you had positive high school experiences, I get why you would want to hang on to that. So,
Yeah, I think that there's I think that schools are really difficult place, like not like anywhere else in the world, really. I think you have to navigate so many more different people compared to even in a workplace. If you work in a big workplace, it's not the same as a school.
yeah. And I mean, in a workplace, everyone's kind of like they're being paid to be there. There's a bit of a level of professionalism that isn't always there, but
Should be.
yeah, and I know that there is workplace bullying, but I feel like the consequences are so much more like you can get reported to HR, you can lose your job, all the rest of it. Whereas in high school, it's kind of like, oh, you could get told off by the teacher. and then that's it. Like, no one really gets expelled for bullying. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but, like, it has to reach a
Yeah, and a lot
level.
of it goes under the radar in my experience, unless a young person comes forward and says like I'm being bullied, and even then as a teacher, unless you see it and you investigate it and you see evidence for it, we would always believe the person that's saying that they're being bullied. But also sometimes that can be misinterpreted. Some of the students that I've worked with, they have difficulties with their social communication and reading social cues. So it's sometimes about picking apart what is bullying and what is a disagreement between peers, because that they're different things. The big thing I talk about when I talk about bullying is a power imbalance. And that power imbalance can be physical, so someone's physically bigger than you, physically stronger, physically heavier. It can be emotional, so someone could be more mature, someone could have a more secure base, a more secure attachment. It could be social, they could have more friends, a bigger social circle. And it can be social in terms of the understanding of social situations, social cues. So it's a power imbalance with bullying. And a lot of people think it's just someone being bigger than someone or stronger, but it's not always.
No, that's sort of often like the more shallow stuff, or like the stuff that you see more in movies or whatever, where bullying is all physical. Whereas I found in high school, like the stuff that was always worse was like the mental games, and that might be my experiences as a girl. Like the mental stuff is always what takes more of a toll. I know that there was a bit of a thing as well of like things being seen as just high school stuff, or like just high school sucks, but also like if you talk to people
Yeah.
about it, it's like, oh, it's just high school. You'll grow out of it. It's not that serious. It's not going to affect the rest of your life. So it's like, even though this stuff happens, it doesn't always get taken seriously.
And I think that can be really damaging, because actually as a teenager and a an early teenager, your brain and everything is going through so many changes and so much development, and it's only really comparable to the development you have as a baby, like a little baby. You're learning how to be in the world and what the world is like and how to be a functional member of society. And if that foundation is rocky for whatever reason, whether it's bullying, whether you struggle in other ways at school, it can really, really last into adulthood.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, using myself as an example, I do think that, I mean, I'm 30 something.
One, you're
31.
31.
I'm 31. I nearly said 32 then. I was like, no,
I'm
not yet.
32.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's because you said that you were turning 33. I think that's what threw me. I'm like, there's a year between us. Like, have I just spaced a year? But anyway, yeah, so I'm 31. So I would like to think that I am over any high school trauma. God knows what a therapist would say. But in my mind, I would like to think that I'm like over any high school trauma. But I know that the things that impacted me, so like I was bullied a bit in high school, nothing too major, but I'm an incredibly socially awkward person. And, now that mental health and anxiety and things are becoming much more known, I'm kind of like, that's what it is. That's social anxiety. And I definitely had that as a teenager, and to a much more degree than I have now. Like, I got picked on a bit for that. And all that meant was that I like regressed into myself. So, like, I became scared of speaking in general because, like, anything I say, it's going to get taken wrong. It's going to get used against me. So, I put up these like walls, like mental walls. And like I look back on it now and I'm like, even people who would have maybe wanted to talk to me, I would have come across as so rude because I had these mental walls. So I wasn't letting anyone
Mm,
in. And they would have just gone, Sam doesn't like talking to people. When actually I was just like, in my mind, I was protecting myself because in my mind, everyone was against me,
yeah.
which very high school thinking. But then I went to uni and then in my young 20s and trying to shake that mentality and trying to get out of that space of you've got to let people in, you've got to, I don't know, like you've got to bring these walls down and show people that you want to talk to them. Otherwise, people just aren't like, why would someone want to talk to you if you look like you're not going to want to
Mm,
talk to them? You know what I mean? And so like the things that were painted as just high school stuff actually like had a knock-on effect, and I had to like unlearn all of that in my 20s. And I think that that's not touched on enough, that in the early 20s people are taking this big jump from being a teenager and a child to an adult, and that there might be all these things that they learned in high school that don't fit in the real world, but they're still
yeah.
there. you know?
Yeah. And I think it's worth remembering as well, your brain's still developing in your early 20s especially.
Yeah.
They actually think that puberty now doesn't finish until about mid-20s, and it says about 26 for men. It's a bit younger for women.
Yeah, I heard the same thing, and it makes a lot of sense because, like, I definitely feel like it was my mid to late 20s, and around that time when I started to understand, like, the mental space that I put myself in, how that was coming
Yeah.
across to other people. I definitely would have come across as rude to the people that did maybe want to talk to
I
me.
think it's difficult. I think that it's really difficult to see how you might come across to other people generally. And you
Yeah.
have to have some level of, not some level, but a certain level of emotional maturity and insight to be able to do that as well. A lot of teenagers, they don't quite have that yet.
No, and it must be really hard as a teacher as well to like see these things happen. And if you explain it to a teenager, they're not going to get it, or they're going to think that, I don't know, what does Mel
Yeah.
know? She's
Yeah.
old.
Well, basically,
No
and
offense.
especially because I work with autistic teenagers as well. So there's that, sometimes that extra level of social difficulty that they have. And they've all, like, the students that I've worked with for the last 5 years, all of them have had varying levels of difficulties in school and difficulties with attendance. And it is almost teaching them, not everywhere's like that. And there is so much, yeah, unlearning that you have to do with them. I think I know that I get quite reflective when I'm in the classroom and I look at the dynamics between. I teach year 9, year 10 at the moment, and that is quite a difficult age. That so that's like 14, 13, 14, 15, and that is a difficult age. There is a lot going on, a lot of changes happening. Everyone's trying to figure out their place in the world, and even just their place in the classroom society. But you also almost have to let some young people make some mistakes as well, because otherwise they don't learn from it. If we're continually holding their hand and coaching them through every single social interaction, they'll never learn to do it themselves.
Yeah, they'll fall down. I've had this same conversation with Grant because his nephew, we are trying to figure it out earlier. He's either like 14 or 15. He's in that kind of age, kind of area. Because he reacted, like, did a thumbs up or a laughing reaction to Grant's Instagram story. And his Instagram story was like a little bit, I don't know, it,
Was it the
it had
beer
some
can
sexual
one?
innuendo to it. And it was the beer can one. So for context, Grant and I went to a beer festival yesterday and there was a mechanical bull beer can and Grant went on it. But at the start, where he's trying to find his balance, he looks like he is gyrating against this beer can. And
It's
yeah, I
funny.
mean, it is exactly
It
what it
is
sounds
funny.
like. It is great. It is such a good video. I wrote the caption for it, and it's like, oh, when you accidentally get caught humping a beer can. And yeah, his 14 or 15-year-old nephew laugh reacted to it, and Grant was like, "Oh," but I'm like, "He's a teenager now. Like, you're still picturing him as a 10-year-old.
A 10-year
He
old would understand as well.
understands."
A lot of them.
Yeah. But, like, so he would be exploring all this stuff and, like, learning all of this stuff and figuring out.
I don't know. It's going to sound really strange. Like, I wouldn't want to go back to high school, secondary school, when I've worked in high school and secondary school for my whole career. I would not want to go back as a
Yeah, no,
student.
I never would.
And I was always that person that they looked like they loved school. So everyone's like, "Oh, you're good at school. You love school." And actually, I
Yeah, you were like the prefect and everything. Like you were like the I don't want to say you were the nerd because you were like a well-liked nerd. Like you weren't like the class nerd who
awesome.
sits in the corner like with the glasses and like the calculator like,
Well,
"Oh,
I
yay,
think
calculator."
everyone thought that, and then obviously I got diagnosed ADHD when I was 27. And a big part of the assessment was looking back at your high school years and seeing what you found difficult. And I had this moment of realization where I was like, oh, not everyone felt this anxious and tired after every day at school. So basically, I was masking constantly.
Yeah.
13 years of school, and it is exhausting. And actually, I hated going to school. I like learning. I love to learn, but I hated school. And I once got asked by my husband, well, why did you go into teaching? And I said, I've never really thought about this answer, but I wanted to be part of a school experience that wasn't like my own. And I wasn't particularly bullied or treated horribly
Yeah,
or anything like that. Like Sam said, I was a bit of a nerd. So people did make comments about
but in the
that.
nicest
Um,
way.
I remember I was always just, like, second in the class. I was never first. There was one lad who was always first. People would, like, try and wind you like, "Oh, you're not first," and things like that. And like, yeah. And I think, and then I just burnt out. I got to 16 and I just burnt out. I was that kid that got all A's and A stars at GCSE. Got to sixth form and I was like, nope, no, not doing this anymore. I'll do chemistry, biology, physics, and maths A level. And then, oh my God, they're so hard. They are so difficult.
Yeah, there's only so much you can take. And the jump from GCSE to A level was
Yeah,
huge. And I remember like I did like English and arts and stuff. So very much not the same. But I remember like going from doing a GCSE English essay to an A level one. I was going from getting A's to getting like D's. And I was like, my content hasn't changed. And I get that that's the problem,
yeah.
but no one could tell me how to make it better. It was just it's just not enough.
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Okay, but how?" You know, we've gone from 1 month to the next. How have all the rules changed? I can't just add a semicolon and get an A. Like,
No.
when did that change?
Well, there's a few examples in science. This is the equation for respiration, for example, but it's not just that. There is more. It is actually a cycle, and there's about 4 or 5 different reactions going on in there. So it's not just that one reaction where glucose and oxygen make carbon dioxide and water and energy. There's so much more to it. So when I teach biology now, I'm like, this is the main equation for respiration, but not all of it. Because if you do A level biology, you're going to have to unlearn this. If you do degree, you're going to have to unlearn all that.
Do you feel so lied to? Like, when they come out with like, "Oh, by the way, that thing we taught you, actually not right."
Yeah,
So
and I
much
understand why they
gaslighting.
don't teach. Yeah, they don't teach you the whole thing for a reason. But God, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting for sure, and it's a massive jump, and I found the social stuff harder than the lesson stuff, and,
Hmm.
like, I was never, like I mean, I definitely got, like, worse grades than you. I wasn't bad by any means, like, I was more A's and B's, and you were A's and A stars, so but, like, the social stuff, I found it so tiring and so difficult. I think a lot of the things that you're told in TV shows and movies where it's like, "Oh, just ignore them. It'll be fine." Or like, "Oh, the bullies are actually really just sad, and so feel sorry for them." And it's like, "No, that's not actually helpful advice.
No,
Like,
it's
that's
not.
not something you can put into practice. That is just like a platitude that you can give." And yeah, I know it would be so hard as a teacher.
It is hard as a teacher. So I try not to say like, oh, they're doing this because they're unhappy. Because A, you can't. As a teacher, you often know like the kids that are bullying. Quite a lot of the time, they are unhappy and they do have
Yeah.
quite a lot of things going on. But lots of people have things going on and don't do that. So it's not helpful to a victim to say, oh, well, they've got a lot of shit going on. So they,
Yeah, because it's like, what about my own shit that I've got going
yeah.
on? Like,
And part of it's definitely around teaching the bully as well, but it's not down to the victim to do that. It's down to the adults to support with that.
100%. And I do feel like a lot of that kind of stuff people do outgrow. It's not like you go into the workplace and people are bullying in the same way that they do in high school. But there is definitely still, like, especially I find with girls, mob mentality is a really big thing. Like, no matter where you go.
Yeah, and it's difficult. I think where my high school mentality comes in is if friends do something without you, without the whole group, I start to get like, why are you doing it as like a group of two or
Me
a group of
too.
three? Why isn't everyone doing it? And actually, there's lots of reasons why you might do something as a group of two, and you think rationally. And I've had a lot of CBT to try and overcome these thought patterns. Like, they probably were just texting and decided to go round for a burger or something, but that feeling of being excluded, that I think stems from some like teenage stuff.
Yeah, I think for sure. And yeah, I know that I still get those feelings, and I can literally trace it back to when in school that feeling comes from. I can fully remember it. Basically, I hung out this group of, again, girls, and I was like, I don't know, I was in my own world. Like, I was oblivious to the world, and I didn't realize that like the three of them hung out all the time without
Hmm.
me. And then one day I realized, and I was like, oh. Okay.
Yeah.
But then, like, once I realized, I thought back on things and realized that they would, like, have in jokes and then make fun of me for
Mm.
not knowing them. So it spiraled into this whole thing. Anyway, like, I'm very much trauma dumping now. So, but moving on from that, I have some close friends now, and I've spoken to them about this is how I may feel if, like, I'm left out of something.
Yeah.
And by all means, don't feel like I have to be a part of everything. Like, I can't be everywhere all at once. But, if things can be a conversation, that's always really good for me. Cause, like, especially at the moment, we are like a small group. So there's a group of like 3 or 4 of us girls that hang out quite a lot. So if 2 of them meet up for something, it is kind of like you're the only one left out. And it's like if you're a group of 10 and 9 of them meet up, that is shitty because there's only one person left out. But if you're a group of 10 and 5 of them meet up, there can be reasons. But
Have you ever come across someone who prefers the like one-on-one interactions or small group interactions and actively asks those people though to keep it a secret from the rest of the group? Like, oh, I'm going to see
yes, I
Sam.
have.
Keep it a secret from Grant though.
Yes, I have come across someone like that. Yeah, and it led to drama, not so much from that kind of stuff specifically, but it was very much like the fact that she was like pulling people aside to have all these secret conversations and secret hangouts. It meant that it became a big game of Chinese whispers.
Yeah.
And people were angry at other people, and none of us had any idea why until we all stemmed it back to this one person and we're like, oh, she told us. She told me that about you. And she also told you this about me. And we were able to like bring back and like I'm all for people wanting to hang out in smaller groups. It can be far less intimidating. And I do know, especially when people have mental health stuff going on, it can be a lot to hang out in a big group.
Yeah.
But I think you have to avoid talking about your mutual friends then.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I would never hang out with, let's say like I have this friend called Amy. I would never hang out with Amy and talk about our other friend called Megan. We unless we were saying things complimentary,
Hmm.
like we wouldn't hang out just to bitch about Megan. It wouldn't happen because we're actually friends. Like we actually like each other.
Yeah, I think for some people though, and I know a couple of people like this, not very many, but I think they like to be the one that people go to and that people talk to and they have all these one-on-ones with.
Yeah, and I can understand it. It makes you feel very wanted. It makes you feel
Hmm.
special, but it is again, it's very high school. It's
It is.
very wanting to be the popular person. When actually like in my group of friends, I would say like the most popular people, they're that way because they make the most effort with everyone. So
Yeah.
like they're always the ones that like will offer for us to use their house for a hangout, and they'll remember everyone's birthdays and they'll offer to cook. They'll have all the ideas. And it's not me and Grant. Like we we are far too like chaotic. Like we don't have any ideas. Or if we do, we don't put them into action because we're too busy going, this would be a great idea. And then 10 minutes later we've forgotten about it. Whereas these guys actually put ideas into action.
Yeah, I can remember the ideas when you were in the UK.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, we
Yeah.
can't fit all that in one day. It takes 3 hours to get anywhere from here.
Yeah, that's very reflective of life.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I know. I think that when you get older, there are definitely those people who still cling to those more high school ideas. But I think that, I mean, for the most part, once you find the right people and you find your people, I think you can get out of that. I think so much stems from high school. Like, if
Yeah.
you've had bad relationships, like romantic relationships in high school, and you've been cheated on or bad things have happened, like that is your first impression of romantic relationships. Like that would stay with you.
It's your
Like,
blueprint for it, isn't it? I think your first blueprint of
yeah.
relationships, romantic relationships, tends to come from your parents and family members around you, which we won't go into. And then your second blueprint comes from your own, but at those early stages. And a lot of that, when you're a young teenager, especially, that it's just a nice friendship, isn't it? It's just a closer friendship, and the
Yeah.
holding hands in the playground and ignoring each other for 3 days because you don't know what to say to each other because you're 11 and
My first boyfriend in high school, I'm pretty sure we didn't actually, I think we hung out once. It was more just like we said we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and then that was the relationship. And then like about a week later, we're not actually like doing anything. Let's call this quits. But
it's not you, it's me.
yeah, bring out all the cliches. I
Yeah,
mean, in
because
high school, no one's heard them before, so
well, that's the other thing where your blueprints come from is the media and TV and films and.
Yes, I do sometimes even now have to call Grant out because he has a very Hollywood view of relationships sometimes, and I have to be like, "No, that's not reality," and he's like, "Oh, how do you know?" I'm like, "Because it's not. That's like a Hallmark movie. You're"
So in films, it doesn't rain on anyone's wedding day. And if it
Never.
does, it's romantic rain and heavy
Yes, it's just a
rain.
sprinkle, and everyone has umbrellas that perfectly cover all of you, and,
Yeah. No one's
like, if it
shoes get
snows, no one's
muddy.
cold.
No.
Yeah, Grant definitely sometimes brings out, like, the Hollywood ideas, and it's cute.
It's like the family breakfast. The mum makes the big usually the mum makes the big breakfast in the morning, and the kid comes down and
Yeah.
grabs a slice of toast and is like, "I'm off."
Yeah, and
Like,
then it's
eat your
just the mum there
breakfast.
with this huge buffet breakfast.
And people think that's like just American. It's not just American. It's just the way. It's just the way that Hollywood portrays it, and the
I
family. But it's
know.
even like how high school's portrayed in Hollywood though as well. Like there is
Yes.
definitely. I love Mean Girls. I love the film Mean Girls. I find it hilarious. And there are definitely people like all the characters there, but they are a caricature.
Yeah, it's all exaggerated. I found that the real issues going on in high school were subtle, and I
Hmm.
think that's why it was hard for the teachers because it was like you could probably the teachers I'm sure could sense like an undercurrent of things going on or like
Yeah.
this person doesn't seem okay. This person seems excluded. This group of friends seem to be in an argument, but it's all like low level. And so you can't, I don't know, you can't just get everyone together and say, hey, stop being stupid.
No, because then as well, the people who aren't doing that, the people who don't have any beef going on, as I call it to my teenagers, they're like, oh, who's got beef?
Yeah.
And then it becomes
Yeah,
even more
exactly.
of a drama. So you have the talk, we try and build like talking about bullying and things like that into the curriculum because if you increase awareness when there is an active issue going on, the kids will be looking for it. And not in a good way, not in a looking out for each other kind of way, in a gossipy, yeah,
Like
in a gossipy
if
kind of way.
everyone's suddenly like, hey, there's been a sudden rise in cyberbullying, and this can lead to really dangerous stuff. And like, everyone suddenly starts trolling all of the socials to find it. Yeah, yeah, you don't want to bring light to something and yeah, cause more issues. Which I guess is the advantage once you're out of high school. In high school, everyone's just all up in each other's business and you can't get away from each other. And like, it's a bit like that at work, but you are also a bit more doing your own thing. Your work circle is not necessarily your social circle as well. It can be, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. Whereas in high school, your school circle and your social circle are the same thing and you're all up in each other's business and people are looking for the drama.
Love the drama.
I mean, I love the drama too from afar. Like, I like watching it.
Hmm.
Like, I like seeing it on YouTube. But if I'm a part of it, I'm like, no thanks.
I think as long as someone's not getting like genuinely hurt by something, I don't like seeing that. Don't like seeing people getting hurt or upset. Sometimes drama is just daft. It's why people watch soaps, isn't it? 'Cause it's
Yeah.
drama. It's not real life.
Yeah. For our original question of like, do we ever move on from high school? I think people do definitely grow up. I think there's like the undercurrents that stick around. I know, like, I think my main issue is that I think that when things happen in high school, I think it gets very dismissed.
Mm.
Not saying by you. Like I know that you do an awesome job and like, you do a lot of work, especially around like safeguarding and creating policies and
Yeah,
trying to create a safe space at school. But I mean, not necessarily just by teachers either, but by parents as well. A lot of the time it can be dismissed as, oh, you're 14. This isn't gonna matter in a few years. But you never know what's gonna stick in someone's brain.
yeah.
Like sometimes I remember the most random stuff and I'm like, why out of everything is that there?
Well, that's the thing. I think when obviously our issues from teenagerhood, high school are different, but they do shape who you are now. So my thing that I mentioned earlier about being second or top in the class and the nerd and all that, that's how I prove my worth though, is by doing courses and qualifications and going to university for the fifth time. Because I'm worthy then. I deserve my job. I deserve the position that I'm in. When actually I'm doing my job without having the qualifications. I do like to learn. I do enjoy learning. But at the same time, whether I enjoy learning intrinsically, so I get a lot from it myself, but it's also the extrinsic thing of being able to say, "Been to uni 4 times," and
Yeah, and, like, I completely like, especially if you're an academic person and that was the way that you got validation in school, I can definitely see why, like, getting qualification after qualification, it can be addictive
Mhm.
because it's, like, self-validation and, like, I think it's great. I think that, like, I mean, you learn so much from all of the different things that you do, and, yeah, I mean, I've definitely done courses before and I'm like, "Oh, I actually already knew all this," but it's still sometimes nice to have the verification that what you're doing is right.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a bit of like a control thing as well. Like, oh well, if I do the SEN course or the leadership course or something like that, and that shows people that I can do it, and then I'll be able to do it. It's that validation, but also that this is an issue of mine where I will immediately go. Well, I know we're going to talk about people pleasing probably in another episode, but I'll immediately go yes to things like, oh, we need someone to do this. I'll do it, and that stems from school. That's what I used to do at school.
Yeah, I still do that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to recover from being a massive people pleaser too. I think that might be like a genetic problem we have because we're both massive people pleasers.
Yeah, there are a few things that we could explore with that one, I think.
Oh yeah, that's probably a whole episode on its own for sure. But then like for a while, I don't do it so much anymore, but for a while a couple of years ago, we were hanging out with our friends a lot and I mean, we didn't necessarily have the money to be hanging out with them as much as we were. And so like Grant started skipping things and I felt like I couldn't.
Mm.
And me trying to explain to him why I felt like I couldn't, I was like, but if I don't go to this, then
I won't be invited to this. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that happened once like I skipped something and then while they were there they planned something else and like I felt so bad. I was like there was no malice in it at all. Like they are lovely people, like wonderful people. But like that's my high school experience expressing itself. Like that fear of being left out and isolated.
Mhm.
And I have got better from that and a lot of getting better from that has come from like talking to my close friends about it and being this is what happens in my brain
Yeah.
when these things happen. And like I love hanging out with you guys, but I also feel like I need to prove my place in our friendship group. And
Yeah.
they were like, "Well that's crazy. You don't have to prove your place in our group. We're your friends. Like we are your group." And I'm like, "Yes, but my brain says different things."
See, I've moved on from that kind of thing in the last year because as you know, I've had some stuff going on with my health and mental and physical as well. And there was times where I couldn't do social things. But I said to my friend, because we're really open about mental health things like that, I said, I'll say I've got this stuff going on. This doesn't mean I don't want to see you. I actually can't at the moment, but
Yeah.
please just if you can, just keep asking and I will say yes eventually.
Yeah. And I think it's important, like when you find the right people and you can talk to them openly, then it's great because you feel so much less insecure and the old insecurities just don't bubble up.
Yeah, as often.
As often, yeah. I feel like it is so important to just not dismiss young people, to never dismiss it as like just a young person issue, because I think especially now that we're learning so much more about mental health, we're learning that that stuff is, it matters, it's there, it really shapes people and impacts people.
I think something we haven't touched upon is the increase in the social media and online thing because yeah, we had phones and things when we were younger, brick phones and no
Barely,
internet.
yeah.
Um, I couldn't imagine though what some kids who are being bullied or just if they had a falling out with their friends, it's constant all evening on their phone, on Snapchat, on they don't use Facebook, it's usually on Snapchat, they all use Snapchat now. And we'll have kids coming to school and we'll have parents in school like, call my child such and such on social media. Can you help us with that? And we help them with it in terms of the talking through the social side of it and things like that. But also, this is what's happening at home. It's not happening in school. They don't have the phones in school.
Yeah, so it's kind of out of your jurisdiction.
Yeah. And we will always help, but we also need the kids to take some responsibility for it too, and the parents, because they know more than we do, the kids do. I remember when Snapchat was first out back in the day. Snapchat was first out. But it's completely different now. Completely.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I think that this must be the hardest time to be in high school because you just can't get away from it.
No.
And, like, social media can be bad and toxic as a 30-something-year-old, so I dread to think, like, the impact it can have when you're so impressionable and your brain's like a sponge and every little thing that happens is just being absorbed. You hear things about I know that podcasts are becoming more and more of a thing. And I was trying to explain to Grant the other day who Andrew Tate is and about the manosphere on the internet.
Ugh.
It's like if someone who is like young comes across that, that could shape their entire thinking. And it's such a bad way of thinking. Like it is so dangerous, and the internet and everything is just so broad and vast, and it's just grown to such a crazy level that
Yeah.
things might happen in high school, but if they're put online, they're then online pretty much forever. And that doesn't mean that anyone will ever find them. Like there's so much on the internet. It's so hard for people to find anything, but it's still there. So like you can never dismiss it because it could be there for someone's entire life.
And there's always that threat, like if you say something or do something and you say something in a message to someone or send something in a message, that then is not yours. What you've sent to them is not yours anymore. It's up to that person what they do with that, whether it's a picture, whether it's a message, whether it's an opinion you've given to them.
Yeah, 100%. And like even doing this, like doing the podcast, like, I'm really enjoying doing this, but I also know that everything I say is potentially going to come under scrutiny. It's
Yeah.
like I mentioned that I did an episode with a friend of mine, Steph, about landlords. And, we were talking about it and it was great. And we were like basically talking about how some landlords are super shitty, but not all of them are. And there are good ones out there. And then I was listening to it back afterwards and I was like, I know that like this isn't how we meant it at all, but some bits of this would come across as really out of touch because the fact that we can both afford homes
Mm,
and there's so many people out there that can't, I'm like, the whole topic is potentially like triggering to some people.
yeah.
And especially as a teenager, like you could make one comment and it could get twisted and blown up, and it's not at all how you meant something, but it's how it's going to be portrayed and it's how it's going to be sent to everyone. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you were saying about doing the podcast and stuff, there was part of me when I was first asked that I was a bit apprehensive because obviously I do work in the public sector. I've not mentioned where I work or anything like that, but I do work with young people. And you can probably work out a bit from what I'm saying. Everything I'm saying here is my views, and it's not stuff that I wouldn't say either to the young people and parents I work with. Because if I was to say something here on this and what could be a public piece of media that I wouldn't say to those kids or parents or my colleagues, and that's completely unfair.
yeah, it's hard because you sometimes you never know how things will be interpreted. And I remember things being twisted when I was in high school, and for that to be twisted and put online would be so scary.
Well, we have now like kids, not so much where I've worked, fortunately, but kids recording their teachers and putting on TikTok.
Yeah, I mean sometimes like I like those videos, but like I usually like the wholesome ones.
I like the wholesome ones, but not the ones where the teacher's obviously struggling and they need some support with whether it's classroom management or whatever. It's a tough job, and some people unfortunately shouldn't be doing it as well. I do agree
Yeah,
if somebody, like in any profession, if somebody's being abusive and they're not meant to be in that profession, not meant to be working with vulnerable young people, then absolutely they should be called out about it, but on the right channels, use the whistleblowing procedures and things like that. Don't post it
yeah,
to
don't just put it on
TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, and like it's so out of context as well. Like TikTok is such a it's short form media, and I am also planning on doing an episode about short form media because I don't love it. I think it's killing our attention spans, and it's so easy for things to be taken out of context. But again, that's a whole nother episode. But if this person is, standing up there doing their job, and sometimes as well, this is probably a controversial take on it, but sometimes kids are just dicks. And like we had one teacher in high school who was lovely. She was just such a lovely woman. But my class had a lot of very loud and very rowdy characters. And as soon as they saw it was this teacher, they would escalate everything to a 10 from the moment it started. She did not have a hope in hell of controlling this class because they had just decided that they had a problem and were just going to be dicks about it. If someone took a video of that and put it online, people would probably judge her when the reality is that the class were deliberately making that escalate.
Yeah.
That wasn't a comment on her teaching. The class had just picked her as a target, and yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. That can happen as well, unfortunately. And you don't I always say to the kids that I work with, you don't have to get on with everyone. I said you're not gonna be everybody's not gonna be your cup of tea, you're not gonna be everyone's cup of tea either. But part of what we're teaching you in school is sometimes you have to work with people that you maybe don't get on with, you don't necessarily always agree with. But it is important to remember. Well, I talked about this with my sister-in-law yesterday and brother-in-law, and we'll talk about like kids and the whole "oh, you should listen because I say so" thing. Now, I don't inherently agree with that, but what I do say is I'm telling you, advising you to do this because I have the life experience to know that this is likely the most positive thing for you to do, the best thing for you in this situation. Don't climb on the windowsill because and why? Because I said so. Well, no, I know from experience that if you climb on the windowsill, you might fall off the windowsill and end up having to go to hospital.
Yeah, it's like the grown up version of because I said so.
Yeah,
It's sometimes I might have more context than you, and I might know something that you don't know that impacts the situation. Like when I used to manage a team and I was in disability support, sometimes I would know something that was going on in a client's life or in a staff member's life that I couldn't share,
yeah,
but it would impact how they should be supported. So sometimes it was like, no, no, you need to do this thing to support this person. And you don't necessarily need to know
yeah.
why. You just need to know that this is the correct thing to do and to trust me and to trust the process.
Yeah, kids are very big on fairness, and we look at like equity versus equality. And I said, like, not everyone needs the same thing. You all need different things. If someone needs to wear like loop earplugs while they're working, you might not need to wear them. If someone needs to go for a walk part with your lesson, it doesn't mean you need to do that. It doesn't mean it's unfair that you aren't able to do that for whatever reason. This person might need to text their mum part through the day because of their anxiety. Doesn't mean you need to have your phone.
No, 100%. I talked in my episode about gender stuff with Grant. We talked about equity versus equality. And it's true, it's just whatever's needed to bring everyone up to a level playing field, to give everyone the best opportunity and the best chance to succeed. And I do think a lot of adults could learn that as well.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of the stuff that I do is around like disability access and inclusion. And in my mind, an ideal world is someone shouldn't have to like disclose their disability or anything to get the accommodations.
Mhm.
Everything should be set up so that everyone can take what they need and put in what they need.
Yeah.
So like everyone may not necessarily need to use all of the tools at their disposal, but they should be available for people to use should they need them. And as long as people aren't abusing the system, then it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Being someone who works in special education, that would be so. The world is so neurotypical.
And I think it does massively help with the question of like lessons that people learn from high school and like things that people remember. The fact that mental health is becoming such a more talked about thing, I think that is so healthy,
Yeah.
especially for teenagers. I think it could help so much with these things that, like we talked about, that are sticking with you into your 20s and whatever, that don't necessarily need to. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, it is good. We do a lot around mental health and yet another course. I've done my senior mental health lead training, which is something that the government are funding. And it was really helpful. So it's recommended that all schools in England have and Wales have a senior mental health lead. So someone who's on the senior leadership team who leads on mental health across the school and they have specific training. So I completed that about a month ago and it was really helpful and I was able to look really strategically at how schools and education practices can support mental health. And I think it is such a big thing. I think mental health has become even bigger of things since COVID as well. I know that
Yeah.
we're apparently out of it and everything like that, but it feels like in some ways like we lost like 2 years. I was saying yesterday, I don't feel like I'm 32. I feel like I'm in my late 20s. But
Yeah,
we
it
lost
feels
two
like
years.
those years just didn't happen. Like everything was on pause, and I mean, it's crazy though, because I mean, you got married in COVID. Like
I did,
clearly, it
yeah.
happened. Like all that time definitely existed. But yeah, I think mentally everyone took a bit of a pause because there was too much other stuff going on. You couldn't focus on personal or professional growth because everything else was taking up too much mental space.
Yeah, and the toll on young people as well. So I know people who work in higher education, so with like 18-year-olds plus, and they said the students they've had through in the last couple of years, their learning habits, their resilience, things like that, it's like having GCSE students. It's like having
Yeah.
students that are 2 years lower. And on the other end of the spectrum, in early years, their skills and their social skills and self care skills and things like that are lower than they would be expected. that they were before, possibly before COVID, because people found it was difficult when schools were closed, nurseries were closed. I wasn't closed. I even worked during the Easter, but I was in a very different position. And parents were trying to work from home.
Yeah, parents were trying to like support learning and work at the same time. That you can see why it just everything was a little bit stunted. It's
Yeah.
yeah, and it shows the importance of not just like the learning, but also like the social and developmental growth that happens in school.
And that's where I struggle with purely online schools, because I think
Yeah.
there needs to be other opportunities then for those young people, otherwise they could end up very isolated. I mean, that's quite a neurotypical way of viewing it, because I actually know some young people and adults who'd be quite happy being isolated, as we call it. But there needs to be those learning social opportunities as well, because you're not going to be able to live your whole life just sat in your house and I mean, you can get things delivered and everything like that, but if you need to go to a doctor, mostly you need to go to a doctor.
And I think that if you gave a teenager the option, they are always going to choose, let's chill out at home, let's not go into school. So I think it's got to be very guided, very, if they're going to be fully remote, we need to have this in the curriculum as well so that they are still getting that growth. Because I think that otherwise, like people do take advantage of these systems, and like people take advantage of work from home for sure. So teenagers anyway, I was just gonna say, I think we've like kind of covered everything. Yeah, we definitely had a lot to talk about and a lot of like, I suppose, personal stories. But
It's good. Yeah, I've enjoyed it though.
yeah, it's been really nice to like, I suppose, dive into what we experience and what other people experience and how that does shape you, especially in your 20s. And I think I stand by like what I said. It's so important to not dismiss high school things as being just high school things.
Yeah.
Because, for one, like these high school mentalities definitely stay with us, and like the impacts of high school definitely stay with us for a long time. I think that, like, once you're past like 25, 26, when you said that your brain has cooked, that's kind of when you start to be able to unlearn some of these things. But up until that point, it is everything, it's all consuming. So,
Yeah, like I said, you end up trapped in the same thought cycles and stuff. And I did find that like cognitive behavior therapy really did help with that as well. So I had 2 rounds. I had in my 20s and in my 30s as well. So, well, no, I've had 3 rounds actually.
it's interesting to see when you can pinpoint where it all stems from. But I think to answer the question of do we grow up from high school, I would say yes.
Hmm.
It takes longer than you'd think, though.
I think sometimes it cannot take much to get you back into that mindset, though. I do think if you have a specific experience that was traumatic for whatever reason, I think sometimes you can get like triggered back into it. But I think you end up with more tools when you're older to manage that and deal with that. And no, you're not still in that environment.
Yes, that is such a good way of putting it. Like the thoughts are still there, but you have the tools to understand it better.
Yeah.
Like that is yeah, no, that makes so much sense. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I hope it hasn't been too traumatizing,
No,
and
it's been
I
good.
hope that I can persuade you to come back.
Yes. Yes, we've got a few things that we can come back for. We now know that the recording thing works as well.
Well, I mean, fingers crossed. Hopefully, when I press stop, it's all there. But
Ugh.
we managed to figure it out, I think. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and thank you to anyone who has watched us. Would definitely be keen to hear if anyone has any interesting high school stories that have like stuck with you. It's very interesting because everyone has their own interpretations and their own things that stay with them. So yeah, very keen to hear about that. If you want to find us on socials, it's at Intellectual Potluck everywhere. I'm not on all the socials, but anywhere I can be bothered to post, it's at Intellectual Potluck. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll chat to you soon.
All right.
Bye.